Fair Play, a novel by Pete Fisher. Chapter 28. Germany Calling. Martin fastened his seatbelt. The plane began taxiing. Once in position, it started to accelerate down the runway. Martin's heart beat hard. He was leaving. There weren't many people he was going to miss. He'd probably miss familiar places, but there'd be new ones, and new people. George stuck to English for the time being. A few of his friends were round that first evening. Martin politely declined the bong. He called it a night after the third German beer. He excused himself well before midnight and retired to the guest bedroom. It was a strange feeling, being in a room full of people speaking German. He was going to have to get used to it. George told him his school friend Nicholas was opening a new restaurant in the town centre. He was looking for a chef. Martin really didn't want to go back to cooking, but this was a proper job. He started the following week. Martin showed up punctually at 9 a.m. The restaurant was in an old sandstone building. The former magistrates' court had been built at the end of the 19th century. It had a rather grand doorway at the top of a stone staircase overlooking the old marketplace. Inside, by contrast, was a newly modernised, airy, high-ceilinged bar and dining room. Nicholas showed Martin down to the changing rooms. There were bars on the windows. These had been the cells. How ironic. The windows looked out into recesses below the pavement. There was no direct view of the world outside, just passing feet. It was an eerie feeling. Martin hated having to do Sunday morning brunch. One Sunday, Martin and Nicholas had a huge argument. Martin had omitted to put salt and pepper on the customer's fried egg. Nicholas brought it back into the kitchen, incensed. It was part of a pretentious yuppie brunch dish. Fried eggs on toast with asparagus and smoked salmon. The customer had complained. So geht das nicht. In Germany we put salt and pepper on the fried eggs, you know. The customer expects this. You will please do this in future, you understand? Alles klar, Nicholas, verstanden. But I was taught to let the customer season things like eggs. Not everyone likes salt. Never mind what you learnt in England. You are in Germany now. You have to learn how the German people like their food. Yes, Nicholas. It was the last straw. The day after the fried egg incident, Martin phoned in to say he quit without notice. Nicholas was furious, but Martin didn't give a toss. George helped him claim all his tax back, and he looked around for casual work. Martin had hooked up with Michael, another of George's school friends. He played guitar, sang, and wrote songs. He wanted to put a band together. They ought to get a drummer and a bassist. The small ad worked. A drummer called Lorenz phoned Michael and said he had a rehearsal room. After a couple more weeks, they found a young bassist called Simon. He was quick on the musical uptake and had a great voice for backing vocals. They called themselves Abracadabra. Rehearsals were hot and lazy summer afternoons, shut in that dark, stuffy room. The windows were boarded up inside with hardboard sheets covered with egg boxes. Its walls and floor were lined with old carpet that smelt of stale beer, cigarettes and sweat. Sitting in the cool of George's basement after he got back, Martin would listen to the cassette of what they'd done. Some of it sounded really good. Word had got around that Michael's new band had got an English guy on guitar who was meant to be pretty hot stuff. Martin heard the rumour. He realised he might have a lot to live up to. Their first gig was the Catholic Youth Centre, a sterile flat-roofed annex next to an ugly modern architect-designed church. There was no bar, so after setting up, the band retired to the cafe in the town centre. They sat at tables outside, overlooking the cobbled marketplace, enjoying a beer before the storm. Back at the community centre was a capacity crowd of around 100 people. Most of them were gunning for local hero Michael and his new band. A cheer went up as they went into the first song. It was one of Martin's. Quite a few people lowered their jaws and widened their eyes. It was way better than what the crowd were used to seeing locally. Michael was struggling to keep up at times. Things tended to fall apart when he took the helm. He forgot his lyrics and played too many bum notes to pretend it was jazz. Martin tried not to pull a face. The audience loved it, mistakes and all. Abracadabra conjured a standing ovation. Martin sat in the little Fiesta on the old airfield. It was a wide stretch of concrete with large cracks in it here and there, where grass grew in between. George sat in the passenger seat on the right. Martin was on the left of the car. Now he had to change gear with his right hand and steer with his left. Every time he changed gear, his left hand tried to follow his right. This made the car keep steering to the left. At first, Martin had to struggle to keep a straight line. At least the pedals were the same. Okay, fahr los. Martin put the car in gear and pulled away. He drove around the oblong strip. This was a new challenge to his coordination. After a few more laps, he got the car to go in a straight line. The daily sessions continued. Martin gained confidence. George reckoned it was time to hit the road. On their first outing, Martin had to negotiate the T-junction at the end of George's road. Du hältst an den Stoppschild, ja? You stop at the stop sign, okay? Okay. Now look left and right and left. If it's okay, you go right. Martin looked and pulled out. Seemed okay to him, except he was driving on the left. Verdammte Scheiße, fahr rechts um Gottes Will. George grabbed the steering wheel. He pulled the Fiesta out of the path of an oncoming Mercedes in the nick of time. They both thought they'd had it. Shit, sorry, man. Jesus, Martin, you almost killed us. Martin never drove on the left after that, but the instinct stayed strong. It was weird being a beginner again. After a couple more lessons with George, he braved the German tarmac alone. It was hard to judge every situation correctly. The more he drove, the better he got. It was brilliant to have wheels again. Martin got work with Lorenz, the drummer, installing office ceilings and partitions. He had to work on stepladders, wielding heavy electric drills and other power tools. He spent the day screwing in endless screws and securing countless nuts and bolts. Safety was not high on the agenda. Martin threatened to walk out after the boss let go of a circular saw. It whizzed past Martin's head, still rotating. Even the journeys to and from work were dangerous. The boss drove them to the building site, usually an hour or two away. Martin would try and grab a nap in the back of the car. He'd open his eyes now and then, but quickly shut them again as he saw the speedometer approaching 180. Even at that speed, the boss would drive right up the arse of the car in front to bully it out of the fast lane. Living dangerously was not Martin's cup of tea, but he managed to save up enough money to get a small bedsit. He had his own car, and now he had his own flat. His German was getting better too.